Electronic Arts, or EA, had the chance of a lifetime when they had exclusive rights to make Star Wars games. And with a studio so praised for its quality of games like the Dead Space series or even the Battlefield series, it was such a surprise to see how far they fell. And to be honest, they made a poor attempt at utilising one of cinema's most highest grossing assets, Star Wars, and they couldn't even do that right. Electronic Arts obtained the Star Wars license all the way back in 2013, and they have it now till 2023. But since obtaining that license, EA have only introduced two new franchises to the Star Wars universe, those being Jedi Fallen Order and Star Wars Squadrons. Now, EA have had so much success with the Battlefront series, even after all the scrutiny with the loot boxes, they still pushed on. But let's have a dive into EA's turn with the Star Wars license and if they pulled it off or if they really didn't. The rebooted Battlefront game was EA's first venture into the Star Wars license, and this did make sense as EA are known for some of the best and most immersive first-person shooters on the market today. And so translating their Battlefield formula to the Star Wars world was surely a great way to start their run with the license. And generally, many players were fans of the first Battlefront game under EA, and I certainly was, as the first Star Wars film in 10 years was about to be released, meaning that there was already a lot of hype around the Star Wars franchise. Although Battlefront EA was pretty well received as you could customize your character and all that jazz, many fans were unsure why EA did not incorporate the prequel era into the game. There was certainly a pot of gold that EA at the time just really didn't want to cash in on. Although you could argue that just having the game set in the original trilogy was just a bit of a cash grab for people's nostalgia, but that's just a passing thought, which could ring true, but I don't work there. However, they did create DLC for the game, which unfortunately were paid DLC, but I still bought them anyways because, hey, more Star Wars content, am I right? The 4 DLCs that were released were of really high quality, and before I get to mention, each DLC did come with one new hero and one new villain, as lackluster as they were in comparison to the characters that were already in the game, but let's just move on. The DLCs were the Outer Rim DLC, the fantastic Bespin DLC, the Death Star DLC, which was okay, and finally the Rogue One tie-in DLC. I am very glad that EA did not just abandon the game after its release, as the content certainly tied fans over before the release of EA's next Star Wars project. That being Battlefront 2. It was Battlefront 2. EA's sequel to the Battlefront series was at first a bit of a pain to play, not because I didn't enjoy the game or the gameplay or anything like that, no, that is far from the truth. But this was during the time of the loot box scandal of 2017, where Battlefront 2 and many other games introduced loot boxes, which completely made the games unbalanced, but I have a whole video dedicated to that, so it'll be in the top right corner, feel free to check it out if you're interested. It was just such a shame that these pay-to-win mechanics made the game practically unplayable, especially for people who didn't want to pay up. Now, this whole scandal really frustrated the community, and after this scandal, EA definitely made the smart move and removed all pay-to-win mechanics from Star Wars Battlefront. And now, honestly, this was fantastic news that everyone was waiting to hear. Along with that fantastic news, EA also made Battlefront 2's DLC completely free, possibly as just a little bit of compensation to the fans as they tried to win us all back over again. And this was certainly in an attempt to make us all forget about the whole loot box ordeal. But we didn't forget now, did we? All things considered, however, Battlefront 2 from EA is the definitive place for Star Wars multiplayer even to this day, as I still often find myself hopping back into the game for Galactic Assault or even Capital Supremacy. Luckily, EA took fans' advice and added content from each and every era of the Star Wars saga, from the prequels to the original trilogy, and also content from each film as the sequel trilogy was being released. In addition to that, EA continued to add beloved characters post-launch of Battlefront 2, such as Obi-Wan Kenobi, Dooku, Anakin, Grievous, and even BD-90. Wait, how did that get in my script? I didn't write this. This is an outrage. Honestly though, I still find myself coming back to Battlefront 2 more than any other Star Wars title from EA. And this is due to the vast amounts of modes to play, from boots on the ground to space battles and even a full-fledged campaign, which was absent from EA's first Battlefront title. But sadly, after the Scarif DLC, EA stopped development on Battlefront 2 in 2020, which had a lot of fans confused, as Battlefront 2, especially on the PlayStation side of things, had a massive resurgence of players as it was a free game to download for PS Plus users. And this halting of new content left fans upset, as EA had taken the Battlefront team to work on Battlefield 2042. But I guess EA did have to move on at some point. Now I just hope that if a new Battlefront game did release, that we would just see all the content from Battlefront 2 plus more added to the game, although I highly doubt that this would happen. By this point, Star Wars fans were completely outraged that we were yet to see a single-player Star Wars game. Even under EA, we saw games like Project Ragtag being shoved under the rug. And from the small details that we know about the game, it would have been a single-player Star Wars game in the vein of the Uncharted series, being headed by Amy Hennig. And it was really such a shame that games like Project Ragtag and many others were just abandoned because, you know, single-player games don't sell. Am I right? And after all this pain and sorrow, there was a glimmer of a new hope. And that hope would grace our eyes very soon. That game was Jedi Fallen Order. The release of Jedi Fallen Order was genuinely a breath of fresh air that EA needed to bring to the Star Wars franchise. As after 4 years of purely multiplayer Star Wars games, the fans were hoping that a completely single-player Star Wars game would spring onto store shelves, and it certainly did. Jedi Fallen Order is by far the best Star Wars game that EA has released under the Star Wars label, as it didn't follow the narrative of well-known faces like Luke, Han, and Leia, and instead expanded on the lore between the prequel and original trilogies, and, you know, just did its own thing. Cal Kestis, Grease, Seer, Night Sister Mirren, Terran Malicos, and Trilla were all fantastically written, and it was really nice to see all of them have actual motives and goals, whether they were in line with the protagonist Cal's or not. I found Jedi Fallen Order's story to be very engaging right up to the very end. However, I must say that ending was not what I was expecting, but that's just me. And to be fair, EA and Respawn did have to set up for a sequel, so I can't really blame them there. I loved the way that Jedi Fallen Order followed the Metroidvania formula of having large but primarily linear levels which you can explore all around each and every planet, searching for new lightsaber parts or other customization items to give either your saber, your ship, BD-1 and even Cal a nice bit of flair. I and many others are waiting in anticipation for EA to release a sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, but with Star Wars being a no-show at EA or Summer Games Fest, it is sure to say that it will be a while before we hear any news on a sequel, but, you know, fingers crossed. Finally, we are reaching the threshold of Star Wars games under EA. After the release of both Battlefront games and Jedi Fallen Order, EA had one more game to release, a game that I feel like they hoped would last a lot longer than it did, and sadly it didn't. That being EA's dogfighting Star Wars game, Star Wars Squadrons. Star Wars Squadrons was EA's attempt at creating a Star Wars game focusing solely on starship combat, and it was sort of meant to be a spiritual successor to the Star Wars Rogue Squadron series, another dogfighting simulator created by Factor 5 Studios. Now, I personally didn't bother buying Squadrons at launch, as I personally didn't really like the space combat in the Battlefront games, and I do understand that it was evolved to be a more immersive experience in Squadrons, but the only reason I've played it so far is because it was a free game on PlayStation Plus. Now, my experience with Squadrons was a pleasant one. It's not my favourite Star Wars game, that's for sure, although I did find the campaign to be a good bit of fun, and for the most part it was enjoyable. As you know, it did keep me occupied for a few weeks. But since I've completed the game and dabbled in the multiplayer, I just got bored relatively quickly. As I said earlier, I really do get the impression that EA were just hoping that this game would have a longer lifespan than it did, and I'm sure that fans of this Starship Simulator are still going strong. However, for others like myself who are less interested in the space combat, Star Wars Squadrons kind of just flew under the radar. Pun intended. Now it poses the question, did EA succeed or did they fail with the Star Wars license? Well, it's a bit of a hard question to answer because it kind of goes both ways. EA did succeed in creating some amazing Star Wars games to the saga, and to be fair, at least we got a decent amount of variety from multiplayer, single player, and even space combat. And so in that respect, yes, EA did succeed, but just because EA made a few good Star Wars games doesn't mean that they utilised the license very well. Because the amount of projects that were cancelled really saddened me and I presume many other Star Wars fans because there was just so much potential. And so in a way, yes, they both failed and succeeded at the same time. But now we have other developers working on Star Wars games like Ubisoft, who are creating an open world Star Wars game which sounds exciting, but we don't really have any details on it yet, and I'm just hoping that many other developers and studios will also take their turn in creating a new and exciting Star Wars game, but we're gonna have to wait a little while for that. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, then subscribe, like, and turn on the notification button so you don't miss another upload from me. So thank you, and goodbye.